constitutional bodies by persons being appointed to positions where only those constitutional organs can make the appointment. I speak of the appointment of Mr. Trevor Williams to the position of Office of Director of Youth. Now, all of you are members of the press. You would have seen interviews done. You yourself may have written some of the stories where it was published that this gentleman was appointed. Indeed, he was interviewed by certain media houses, and he outlined the policies which he intends to pursue in that office. As a result, I challenged his occupation of that office by going to the court and asking the court to issue a prerogative remedy called a writ of quo warranto, which is a writ that calls upon the holder of an office to show the basis of his authority to occupy that office. I know that the Public Service Commission did not appoint him. I know that the office of Director of Youth is an office within the permanent establishment of the Public Service Commission, of the Public Service. I know that the Public Service Commission was conducting interviews to fill that position. I know that this individual did not apply for that position. I know that he was not being interviewed for that position. Yet this gentleman proceeds to announce publicly that he is essentially occupying the office, and he outlines the plans he wishes to pursue in that office. Of course, there was a belated attempt to say that he was never appointed and that he is being considered by the government for the appointment. The truth of the matter is he cannot be considered by the government for that position. He can only be considered for that position by the Public Service Commission. And they don't have, at the point in time when I filed the proceeding, they do not have an application from him. And when one looks at the qualifications which the Public Service Commission has advertised in relation to that position, I doubt whether this individual can meet those qualifications. In any event, yesterday the matter was called in court, and the judge made the order absolute. The judge issued the writ of quo warranto restraining Mr. Trevor Williams from occupying that office and functioning in that office until and unless he is appointed by the Public Service Commission. So you have these various instances of flagrant violation of the Constitution, and we continue and we will continue to highlight it to the Guyanese public and of course to the media with a view of ensuring that the institutions that are established under the law and under the Constitution to keep the executive intact are allowed to function properly, because we may soon see a directive coming either from the President or from the Attorney General to the Judicial Service Commission to say who should be appointed judges and who should be appointed magistrates. Now, that is constitutional heresy. So we have to, as a nation, guard against these types of abuses. I also observe with deep concern and regret the unfortunate position adopted by the current administration in relation to the specialty hospital. Now, you would know that the specialty hospital was a project jointly done with the Indian government, and it is being financed by the Indian Exim Bank. It's a project that was intended to provide very specialized and sophisticated health care to the people of Guyana at an affordable price. Also, the institution would have been managed by personnel from India, and those personnel would have trained Guyanese medical personnel for a number of years and expose our medical personnel to the type of training and sophisticated expertise that are not available in Guyana. A lot of money has already been spent on that project. As you know, the contractor who was originally contracted to do the work did not deliver on his contractual obligations, and as a result, that contract was terminated, and that contractor was sued, and judgment was obtained against him. But significantly, the work that was done, when it is measured and assessed, far exceeds the value of the money which was paid to this contractor. So the Guyanese people enjoyed a net gain from the unfortunate impasse which occurred between the contractor and the government of Guyana. It is obvious also that the government of Guyana was not at fault, because that contractor the contract was awarded through a public procurement process, and that contractor was approved by the Indian Exim Bank and indeed by the Indian government. And as a result of that, we had secured an undertaking from both the Indian Exim Bank and the Indian government for the project to continue with a new contractor. Unfortunately, that project is now being scrapped, if I'm to go by what has been published in the newspapers coming from the government, and it would appear that all the monies, therefore, that have been expended on that project thus far would go down the drain. It is similar to what has happened with the Amaila Fall project. The opposition, when the AFC, APNU are in opposition, they knew full well that we had to build a road. They went there, they looked at the road, and they basically said that they were satisfied. That road costed this country several million US dollars. They visited the site of the project, and they were satisfied. A few weeks after, when it came for their support of the project in the National Assembly, they voted it down. So another set of millions of dollars have gone to waste. And I can also cite the airport project, where 1 year in the National Assembly, they supported it, and therefore the project commenced. And then the very next year, they chopped it out of the budget, thereby jeopardizing, again, all the monies that have been spent previously on the project, which they approved. They knew at the time that they approved those expenditure in relation to the airport, it was a multi-year project, and therefore it would have continued over several years. How can you justify supporting it for 1 year and then withholding your support in relation to the next year, when you know at the time when you supported it the first year that it is going to be a project that will take several years to complete? So you have another set of wasting of public financing. And this is coming from persons who have said repeatedly while they were in the opposition that they are concerned about the expenditure of public funds. And you have seen the size of the government. You have seen the number of vice presidents that have been appointed. So you have utterances that are absolutely inconsistent, words that are absolutely inconsistent with actions. Another issue that I want to touch on is the apparent lack of information emanating from the Office of the Attorney General in relation to our position on the anti-money laundering, countering of financing of terrorism bill. I am aware that meetings are being held now at the level of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, and I hope that the Attorney General is attending those meetings, because at those meetings he is supposed to update the CFATF on where we are currently in terms of complying with a regime of obligations and courses of action to which we have committed ourselves as a country, including among them are the enactment of a new bill or an amended bill bringing Guyana up to speed with where the rest of the world is, because as you know, our attempts to do so in the last parliament were frustrated by the joint opposition then. Well, they are now in the government. So I hope that they would be able to comply with the obligations which devolve upon Guyana in relation to FATF and CFATF. It's not only the bill now that has to be passed, but there must be, contemporaneous with the bill, a whole host of regulations, because the longer we take to pass this bill, it is the more that we have to add to the bill, because it is an evolving process. Every day, new recommendations emanate from these international agencies that countries are expected to incorporate and implement within its legal and financial structure. So the longer that we take to do so, the more onerous the responsibility becomes. So I suggest that you make contact with my successor and you get from him an update, and that you get from him also an update in relation to what is the position regarding the admission of University of Guyana law students to the U Wooding Law School for the academic year of 2015-2016, which is scheduled to commence sometime in September of 2015. I am aware that an arrangement was in place for the continuation of the acceptance of 25 graduates of the University of Guyana Law Program who are expected to enjoy automatic entry into the Wooding Law School. But that was not an arrangement that was the subject of any formal accord. So Guyana was expected to aggressively pursue it at every forum, because there are many, many competing interests for legal education in the Caribbean now, because there are several countries that are opposed to University of Guyana continuing to enjoy automatic entry to the Wooding Law School when institutions within the various territories of the Caribbean, other than the University of the West Indies, are not enjoying such automatic entry status. So it's not a bed of roses when you go to these meetings to canvass the position of Guyana continuing, or University of Guyana continuing to enjoy that automatic entry process. So we need to know where we are and where the students are in relation to whether that position still obtains. I knew that it obtained up to when I was Attorney General. I'm not sure what has happened since. I will pause here for the moment, and I will ask my colleague to make his contribution, and then perhaps I will resume when it is appropriate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nandlal. Colleagues, this morning I would want to address what I would want to call, in my own words, the conspiracy of silence as it relates to specific organizations and some sections of the media, as it relates to the violations that are taking place in this country as it relates to people's fundamental rights, particularly in the area of the termination of employment. Why I dub it the conspiracy of silence? Like my colleague would have addressed just now, that there was an instance where a particular minister wrote a letter instructing that the Public Service Commission cease interviews for appointments. Maybe we haven't seen that letter yet, but perhaps there's a letter that is written to media houses and to certain specific organizations to cease reporting on some specific things that are taking place in the country. And that is why I'm dubbing it a conspiracy of silence. I'm hard-pressed to believe that the robustness that existed in the media fraternity and among social and political activists has now been converted into actual inertia since May 11. Let me give an example. Ms. Claire Singh, former REO, Region Number 9, was removed from office, alleging that she was a political appointee, a political type, and she was everything political. Who was she replaced with? Carl Parker. Who's Carl Parker? Carl Parker served as a regional councillor, Region Number 9, in the last RDC.
For which party?
For the APNU. And how could you be removing someone from office because they are of a political type, and you're appointed to act as the REO, a sitting councillor, or I should say an immediate past councillor of the APNU in Region 9 to act as REO. Not a word from the media. Maybe your letter exists, but it have not yet surfaced. We haven't heard from the Justice Institute. We haven't heard from the Guyana Human Rights Association. We haven't heard from the Guyana Bar Association. We haven't heard from the Guyana Women's Lawyers Association. We haven't heard from the Guyana Council of Churches. We haven't heard from the Interreligious Organization of Guyana. We haven't heard from none of the watchdogs of justice and democracy and human rights in Guyana. Let me give you a second observation of why I call it a conspiracy of silence. Mr. Kwame McCoy, Press and Publicity Liaison Officer, the Office of the President, former. It's no secret that Kwame McCoy was injured on May 11th. He was hospitalized. I noticed that in some sections of the media, they even tried to play down his injury. Kwame McCoy's injury is public knowledge. And even if it is not public knowledge, it is because of the conspiracy of silence that exists currently. Kwame McCoy would have sent in his medicals to the Office of the President, which any person who is injured in an accident or any other form or any event that produces injury, and he's on sick leave. While on sick leave, unheard of, his services were terminated for not reporting to duty. How can you be reporting for duty when your doctor would have issued a medical that is submitted to your employer that you're unable to work? But this government terminated Kwame McCoy's contract for not reporting for work, dated the 31st of May. Not a word. The APNU AFC cannot stand the scrutiny of light on these matters that we are talking about. Third case, Mr. Zulfikar Ali, Guyana's representative at the IADB. Removed. Do anybody in Guyana know who is his replacement? Did we take time to find out who is his replacement? If the person who has been replaced there is representing the interests of Guyana, not a word. And I find this to be strange, like I said, because of the robustness that existed in the media and among the Justice Institutes and the Transparency International and all of the people who hold themselves out as the paragon of virtue in this country. Not a word. Ladies and gentlemen, political and ethnic cleansing is taking place in Guyana, and it is being condoned by the quiet acceptance of people who should be speaking against it. And this must stop. This must stop. My colleague, former Attorney General, highlighted that the Constitution guarantees any man or woman in this country the freedoms, including freedoms to associate, freedoms to affiliate or to have specific opinion or conscience, beliefs, and a man or a woman just cannot be terminated or fired because of their political opinion. I think of the case of the acting town clerk, Georgetown, Miss Carol Sober, who in an undignified, well-orchestrated, politically sanctioned manner was publicly humiliated and disgraced at a statutory meeting of the Georgetown Mayor and City Council. And we didn't hear from the Red Threads and the women's activists. Is this the way we're going to treat a woman? Even if you don't want Carol Sober to continue to be town clerk under your new regime, there is what is called due process. And in the absence of due process, in an undignified, subject to public humiliation, politically orchestrated and sanctioned, she is removed forcibly from the chambers of the Mayor and City Council, and maybe a few column inches here and there, stories making it as if it is humor, but it's the violation of a person's rights. And who is standing up for it? It would clearly appear that we've either lost our voices, or we are in league, or we are on vacation. And I speak here about the conspiracy of silence that is coming from both the media as well as from the civil society groups. I've pointed out 4 cases. 4 cases. Finally, because I know we've been going for a while, I want to address this issue of ethnic discrimination. Ethnic discrimination. And there is this projection out there that it was the PPP that ran a racist campaign. So the PPP is guilty of racism. The APNU, the AFC did not, in the minds of some people, run a racist campaign. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the facts and the figures are out there. Look in the areas where the traditional PNC strongholds are and see the voting patterns. And then tell me if ethnicity was not a consideration for voting as it relates to APNU, AFC, PNC supporters. I'd want to debunk this, because here at Freedom House, we are in possession of numerous stories, individuals who come here on a daily basis to complain and to bring to our knowledge the way they are being treated simply because of their ethnicity. It is shameful that a President David Granger-led administration which told the Guyanese people, it's time to unite Guyana, is the administration that is guilty at the highest and at other levels of ethnic discrimination against Guyanese. My son brought it to my attention last night on the social media, where a young lady, and he read it, where a young lady who supposedly admits voting for the APNU AFC was removed from her job. And she was saying thanks to Mr. Nagamutu because that's the change that she voted for. And she indicated, is it because of my ethnicity? I would want to make this call today as the former chairman of the Ethnic Relations Commission to bring an end to this kind of ethnic cleansing, political cleansing that is taking place under this administration. We are sitting on what could literally be called a time bomb. I notice that some political commentators are making the point that if the PPPC were declared the winner of the May 11 elections, I didn't say if they were the winner, I said if they were declared the winner, because the issue of who won is to be determined. We know who was declared. There may have been certain reactions coming from the PNC, APNU, AFC camp. And it would appear that people are taking it for granted that because the PPP, PPPC traditionally is a party that is not known to be taking to the streets in violence and burning businesses and the rest of it, that they can be trampled upon. But I would want to say we've been having a real tough job seeking to restrain and to bring our supporters to some sense of control, because the actions that are being taken at the local levels, at the national levels, at the regional levels is highly provocative. And I call upon the APNU AFC coalition government to bring an immediate end to these acts of provocation as it relates to targeting PPPCs, supporters, activists, and to bring an end, and an immediate end, to this political and ethnic cleansing that is taking place in government. And if this don't come to an end, there will be serious consequences in this country. This facade of having a ministry of social cohesion established, when the authors of division are the ones who are ruling the country, must not go unnoticed. It must be addressed and it must come to an end. So I'll stop here for now.
Questions?
Yes.
I'd like to go first. Mr. Nandlal, taking back to your comments on the anti-money laundering bill, you've raised some serious concerns about the situation Ghana could find itself in if it is not addressed by the new administration soon as. My question is, how do you expect these concerns to be taken seriously when this bill needs to be finalized at the parliamentary level and the PPP is yet to take up its position in parliament?
The PPP's absence or presence in the National Assembly will not jeopardize Guyana's ability to comply with its obligations. The PNC, the APNU, AFC, when they were in opposition, and they were political personnel who are in charge of those agencies. Well, you know, I read in the newspapers that Mr. Niaz Subhan has resigned. And I also read that he will be replaced by a Beverly Alert. This person I know was on the list of candidates for the AFC, APNU. Niaz Subhan was never on a list of candidates for the People's Progressive Party. In fact, Niaz Subhan's role, if he had one in active politics, was while he was in the PNC. He was a PNC member of Parliament, as far as I can recall. So he is being replaced by a person who is, I believe, an executive member of
the AFC.
Of the AFC. I say that to demonstrate to you the hypocrisy which permeates the positions that are being adopted by this new administration. They are politicizing the state media. You have another person who has been who was a candidate, Imran Khan. He holds some very central, important position in the state media apparatus. This is another candidate, another politician. And they are speaking about depoliticizing, and they cut budgetary allocations from these agencies because they claim that they were politicized, when they are actually putting politicians into these agencies. Kwame McCoy, for example, was consistently criticized because of his political association with the People's Progressive Party. But who is his replacement? Mr. Mark Archer. Another, he was a candidate of the APNU, and I believe a personal assistant of the leader of the opposition in the last parliament. So you see the double standards very, very clearly, and I hope that you would highlight them, as you did whenever they presented themselves before.
For your information, right? We have both of the medicals for Mr. Kwame McCoy if you want to have a look at it, since you were asking.
Would it be correct to say that basically the new government is doing just what the former government did?
No.
Worse.
They're not doing what the former government never politicized Gina. They are doing that. That's the point I am making. You will see soon, when they complete their restructuring and reshuffling at NCN, you will see another politically ensconced person being put there. The person who holds the position now is not a politician, is a person who came from the private sector at a high managerial level. No known affiliation with politics. But if she is being replaced, you will look and see who will replace her. Just wait and see.
Mr. Nanda, there were allegations, if I could come on the topic, there were allegations that your former secretary at the Ministry of Legal Affairs was caught taking public documents to you, and she was confronted by the minister and so on. Do you know if there's any truth to these allegations?
I am shocked. I'm unaware of those allegations.
You were also told that you were confronted by the minister himself?
I was confronted by the minister? No, I was not confronted by the minister.
When the secretary was caught taking the documents?
No, there was no, I was not confronted by any minister. My secretary, the secretary that served me as Attorney General was the secretary for Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan for over 20 years.
Same person I'm talking about.
Yes, I know. I know who's my secretary. I must know that.
Thank you.
They controlled the parliament and they put us in jeopardy. We only have 32 seats. Even if we go there and we vote against the bill will still be passed. So our presence or absence there cannot be construed as a basis for exposing Guyana to the perils to which Guyana has been exposed and continues to be exposed.
If I could ask you a question on a more personal level, it has to do with going to Parliament again. How do you feel about going to Parliament? Are you willing to go to Parliament and sit in the opposition benches and represent the persons who do?
I am part of the People's Progressive Party, and the party is dealing with that matter as a collective. As a member of that collective, I am guided by a collective position to which I contribute.
but we've seen people speaking out in an individual position. For instance, Ms. Vindi Prasad.
Well, I have no difficulty with persons speaking out.
Yeah, but would you want to share your
Well,
personal
let me
opinion
just
about
come
it?
in here and make a point, because
Yeah,
Ms. Vindi Prasad
Uh-huh.
did not speak out. Ms. Vindi Prasad shared an opinion
Which was
among her colleagues by way of an email to her colleagues. It was a private email. How it got into the media must say. So don't let us put the point here that Ms. Vindi Prasad is speaking out. Just like I have an opinion, and I share that opinion with my colleagues, Mr. Nandalal has an opinion, he shares that opinion with his colleagues, Ms. Vindi Prasad did the same thing, and that became the subject of public discussion. A private email that went into the public domain. So I just needed to set that record
But
straight.
nevertheless, her position was to end the protest and go to Parliament. I'm trying to get your individual position.
My individual position will not be expressed publicly. It will be expressed at the forum that the party has put in place, and that my private opinion will be taken into account, and a collective, united position will be arrived at, and that position will be made public. And that position is being made public, and I am part of that position.
If I could take you outside of the issues that you raised, if you have your elections petition, is that something that's still on the cards?
Of course, the elections petition will be filed shortly. As you know, I have already said publicly that the People's Progressive Party is committed to the filing of an elections petition. I, at one point in time, had pointed out that there is a time frame within which such a petition must be filed, and that time frame begins to run from the time that the results are published in the official gazette. Well, that has happened, and the time is running. So it will be filed within the prescribed time frame.
Any word from GCOM,
In terms of,
the things they've asked for?
The box-by-box declaration.
And everything
statement
else,
of
have you
polls.
gotten any
as
reaction?
far as I am aware, the party has not been furnished with the information which the head of the list has requested.
Any steps to be taken there?
But all of that is part of the elections petition.
No, but in terms of getting the actual stuff, I know that something might have been filed and so on, and that was
No, it will be subsumed
Okay.
in the elections petition. Noted, and the point that I want to highlight, or the points I want to highlight, are one, this is information which has been given to political parties as a matter of course in every election we have had in Guyana over the last 20 years. It was given simultaneous or contemporaneous with the declaration of the results. Secondly, GCOM continues to maintain resolutely that the election process was transparent, that the results were computed accurately, lawfully, and transparently. Yet, it absolutely and emphatically refuses to give us the information which essentially is the basis upon which the results were computed. They have given us a number, a total, and all we are asking is give us the evidence that led you
To that figure.
to that figure. One would have expected that to keep one's integrity intact, GCOM would have jumped at the opportunity. And those extrinsic of GCOM who continue to say that the electoral results are accurate, lawful and transparent, are not advising GCOM that in the interest of not only GCOM's integrity and credibility, but in the interest of those other agencies and institutions' integrity and credibility, that those information should be produced. And they are not being produced. The president is on record as saying that he will take a firm stand against corruption. The administration has commenced, presumably in pursuit of their search for corruption, have commenced forensic audits into the functioning of 40-odd government and state agencies. There are a couple of observations that I want to make there. There is no more mammoth act of corruption or allegation of corruption which has taken place in recent times than the 2011 elections, because over 200,000 people are saying so. So one would have expected that that is a place where you should do a forensic audit first if you're interested in corruption, unearthing corruption. But the president is on record as saying he is opposed to a forensic audit. His party, the PNC, burnt a large section of Georgetown in 1997 when they wanted a forensic audit, and they got it. Now, he doesn't want a forensic audit, but he wants a forensic audit into some other departments. But more significantly, there are two observations that I would like to make in relation to the forensic audits. One is that we were led to believe, and I'm sure you in the media were led to believe, because you used to write these stories, that there was this mammoth mountain of corruption in the government. One would have expected as soon as the joint opposition took government, they would have been walking on this corruption in the various ministries. That is the impression they get. They created. That this thing is overflowing. It is overwhelming. Now they have to appoint auditors to do forensic audit to find this massive corruption that they were speaking about. So they have to now look with a magnifying glass to look for this huge mountain of corruption that they led the people of Guyana to believe existed in these offices. And then look at the personnel whom they have chosen to do these forensic audits. Two sidekicks of theirs, Anand Gulsaran and Christopher Ram. An audit, as I understand it, is an objective exercise, is an objective forensic analysis of the financial systems and how the financial system works and how monies have been spent. I cannot be persuaded, and I don't think that any reasonable mind can be persuaded that Christopher Ram and Anand Gulsaran can ever bring an objective mind to bear on this process, and that is what is required. And that is why the party has taken the position, which I support, that these forensic audits, especially those that are being administered and conducted by these two individuals to whom I have made reference, are processes that are tainted with bias, polluted with bias. These persons have concluded already, and they have made their conclusions known ad nauseum that there is corruption in government. And then you put them to go and look for it. It's like a judge saying before the start of a trial that a man is guilty of murder, and then lo and behold, you appoint that very judge to preside over the case that you charge the man with. I mean, how you expect that judge to rule? Or how would the law regard any ruling coming from that judge? So that is the unfortunate position in relation to the forensic audit, as well as the posture of GCOM in relation to our request for the information that we consider very important to the credibility of the electoral process.
It is clear that there is a lack of understanding on the part of the new administration. Perhaps they need time to learn about the intrigues and the nuances of government. They need time to be schooled in that. For example, you come to government and you say the consolidated fund is empty. Right? It's an overdraft. How did you find $3.8 billion to give to Gaisuku? Is anybody in the media investigating it? Where did they get it from? If the consolidated fund is empty, you have a bank account that is empty, how could you find $3.8 billion to give to Gaisuku? How could you find $90 million to give to the Public Infrastructure Ministry to do drainage and works and the rest of it? We have politicians whose definition of corruption is I don't understand. Once they don't understand something, it is corruption. And this is where we're having a difficulty in Guyana. Because you had a situation where for the last 3 years in particular, with the help of specific media houses, almost in a daily basis, the churning out of allegations of corruption. The government is corrupt, this transaction is corrupt, the specialty hospital transaction is corrupt. Mr. Nandalal spoke about that just now. Now they're saying they're going to take the same money and they're going to put it to primary health care. It's no longer a corrupt transaction, it's just now we have other priorities of where the money should go. So it would appear that in the English language or in the APNU AFC lexicon, the word corruption means I do not understand.
Or I don't agree.
Or I don't agree. Because whenever they don't understand or they don't agree, the operative word there is corruption. And we need to have a check on that.
If I could just ask a quick question of clarity, because when you were discussing dismissed employees, you raised Mr. McCoy's issue.
Yes.
Are you protesting his dismissal or the manner in which he was dismissed?
I'm protesting both because they go together. If Mr. McCoy is on sick leave, I expect Mr. Lincoln Lewis to be the loudest voice on Mr. McCoy being dismissed while on sick leave, because no worker, contracted or on the establishment, should be dismissed for not reporting for duty while you're on sick leave, and there are bona fide medical certificates submitted to the personnel department of that agency. So I am protesting that. And I'm protesting also the conspiracy of silence that exists as it relates to the particular matter that's outlined.
Could you, just for clarity, say when the sick leave was sent in and when he was dismissed? Could you just say the date?
The sick leave would have been sent in just a matter of days after his injury. And then having visited his doctor subsequently after, a second sick leave was also sent in. As I understand it, his dismissal letter came early June saying that he didn't return for duty as of the 31st of May, and his sick leave that was submitted covered him until the 16th of June.
There's another point that I want to make, since no one seemed to be making it. Recall that NCN and GINA were constantly attacked by the APNU, AFC, while they were in the opposition, on the ground that those two news agencies were politicized.